Alright, hello everybody. This is my English 3 story project from the story The Minister's Black Veil. Please bear with me, I have the worst mic in the world, so I guess let's get to it. Alright, so we have Nathaniel Hawthorne's biography. So Nathaniel Hawthorne was born and raised in Salem, Massachusetts. His father died when he was 4 years old. When he was in college, he was only able to master composition, but was determined to get better. After college, he wrote an amateurish novel, and by 1835, he was able to find his voice and start writing successful stories. Even though his stories were successful, the income wasn't really dependable, so he took up odd jobs here and there. He was able to get enough money to marry in 1842. After losing his job in the Polk administration by the election of the Whigs, Hawthorne wrote The Scarlet Letter, which brought him much fame. After, he wrote The House in Seven Gables and The Blithedale Romance. Hawthorne's last years were creatively anticlimactic. His notes and drafts on how his rough new novel showed signs of declining psyche, which was much more obvious in his last 2 years before his death. Alright. Here we have the plot summary of the story. So the main character, Reverend Hooper, comes to church one day with a black veil on. It doesn't totally impair his vision, but it almost totally conceals his facial features. Everyone is watching him, curious, alarmed, scared, and of course worried. During the sermon, one woman is so shaken that she leaves the church that day. The sermon he made was more powerful and darker than anyone he had done before, mainly because he was like a very soft-spoken and peaceful dude. During the sermon, he talked about secret sin, what we hide from God and others. This had really shaken up the congregation, and when the church was over, the townsfolk gathered up in their little groups and discussed Hooper's appearance and behavior. Normally, people would want to be around Hooper at this time, but people were now beginning to avoid him. That afternoon, a funeral for a young lady was held. Hooper came with the black veil on, but at this point it was now more appropriate. He made a beautiful, sad, and haunting prayer at the funeral. When the attendees were leaving, some said that they saw the Reverend walking with the dead girl's spirit. Later that night, there was a wedding in which Hooper was again in attendance. This time, the veil worn brought a sense of doom and uneasiness with the couple and the other guests. The guest said the bride looked as pale as the dead girl from before. As Hooper was making a toast and blessing to the newly wedded couple, he saw his reflection in the wine glass and was so scared that he dropped the glass and ran out into the night. That next morning, everyone was talking about the incident. However, nobody had really even thought to ask Hooper about the veil. The townspeople ended up gathering up a group of people to go ask him about it, but they were so intimidated by the veil that they couldn't even bring it up. Finally, they decided to bring it up to Hooper's wife, who seemed really unfazed by it all. She agreed to ask him about it and had no trouble asking. She only saw the veil for what it was, just a black piece of crepe. When she asked, Hooper responded cryptically. She didn't understand what he was trying to say. She asked him to elaborate on what he meant, and he basically told her that the veil is a symbol to him and that he won't take it off. She is still pretty confused, and she asked him what he might have done to make him wear it. He mentions that it's a sort of like grieving method for him, and he doesn't say that he has sinned at all. Hooper's wife tells him that all the people think he has done some great sin, but he still refuses to take it off, and by this point, she's pretty like sad and upset, and that he keeps denying any sort of explanation. She then sees what the townspeople see in the veil: the doom, sorrow, darkness, and just absolute gross. She is about to leave him when he stops her and asks her to stay with him, and she asks him to take off the veil again, but he refuses for the last time. Finally, she leaves him. After this, no one attempts to ask Hooper about the veil or attempts to remove it. People say that he's either eccentric or mad and avoid him. Hooper becomes aware of how people are scared of him, and he stops walking to the graveyard to avoid the stares and scared feelings. This causes Hooper to hate his own veil and almost like his own appearance, and he avoids looking even at himself in the mirror. But still he refused to take off the veil. If one good thing had come out of the veil, though, it was Hooper's preaching, and now that people were scared of him, everyone sees him as like a scary dude who is like dedicated and who wanted to remind himself of some great sin that he had done, and he was like atoning for it. Converts held him in like very high regard, and he was always called to sinners on their deathbeds. He had earned the name Father Hooper from all the people who had come to watch his services. Eventually, Hooper sat on his deathbed with many clergymen and Elizabeth by his side. Hooper is in a bad mental and physical state, but even so, he keeps the veil on. One of the clergymen present, Reverend Clark, goes to remove his veil, but Hooper insists that it stays on, even when he's dead. When Reverend Clark asks why he keeps it on for the final time, Hooper smiles sadly, and he asks why the town avoids him when he was only wearing a veil. He wonders why people can't see each other for who they are, and why they chose to focus on his veil and not their own sin. Finally, he says he sees the veil on everyone in the town and dies with a small smile. When he is buried, the veil is still worn by him. Alright. Here we have the character analysis of Reverend Hooper. Okay, so in the beginning, Reverend Hooper has always been like a really cool dude, like soft, kind, and a loving guy. When the veil comes though, Hooper changes into a sad but still pretty cool dude. The way he preaches is different, and his small smiles are now saddened by the revelation that caused him to wear the veil. Hawthorne never explicitly states what caused Hooper's change and why he wears the veil. Hooper can feel the disruption that the veil is causing, and he wants that to go away. He doesn't understand why people won't just leave him be and treat him like normal. He says, If I hide my face for sorrow, there is cause enough, he merely replied, and if I cover it for secret sin, what mortal might not do the same? In the middle of the story, here it is pretty obvious that the veil is starting to take a toll on Hooper. Elizabeth has left him, nobody wants to interact with him very much. Everyone is scared of him and the veil. In this manner, Mr. Hooper spent a long life, irreproachable in outward act, yet shrouded in dismal suspicions, kind and loving, though unloved, and dimly feared. A man apart from men, shunned in their health and joy, but ever summoned to their aid in mortal anguish. This way of living leads to him becoming scared of himself and his own veil. However, the symbolism of this veil means much more to him than the relationships and his image. In the end of the story, Hooper realizes a new meaning to the veil, one that he didn't find until he grew old with it. Regardless of what the veil meant to Hooper, the townspeople were also quick to notice Hooper's change or sin, that they forgot to look at each other's sin, much less their own. They failed to realize that they all have their own veil on, one that they believed could hide their sins from each other and from God. Hooper saw the hypocrisy of the townspeople go widely unnoticed because something different was happening, being the change in Hooper's life. Nobody stopped to think that what Hooper was wearing was only a veil and it didn't have to mean anything. Nobody stopped to think that all the townspeople gossiping and judgments were all sinful ideas and hurtful to Hooper. Hooper realized that they were all so caught up in his sins that they forgot their own. It says, Tremble at each other, have men avoided me, and women showed me no pity, and women screamed and fled, only for my black veil. What but the mystery with it, obscurely typifies, makes this crepe so awful. I cannot read at all, but that's okay. So here we have the symbolism analysis of the veil itself. So the veil is a symbol for the separation, hypocrisy, and sin that we hide from everyone, which separates us all. And it says, but even amid his grief, Mr. Hooper smiled to think that only a material emblem had separated him from happiness, though the horrors which it had shadowed forth must be drawn darkly between the fondest of lovers. Here, Hooper knows that what has separated him from Elizabeth was only physical material, but at the same time, it was the lack of understanding that separates us all. The veil represents that deep separation caused by the lack of understanding of one another. Elizabeth and Hooper had a good relationship, and that was cut off by the fact that Elizabeth couldn't stand not understanding. Alright. This one says the theme analysis. So the first theme, instead of focusing on each other's sins, we should be looking at our own. This theme is more evident from the middle to the last parts of the story, because we begin to see how poorly the Reverend was being treated. The townspeople were so focused on the veil and why Hooper had it on that they couldn't realize what they were doing, being gossiping and judging and avoiding him. It says, "Why do you tremble at me alone? Tremble also at each other." This theme could also relate to the theme of not judging people by appearances, because it has so greatly affected Hooper's life, even though the rumors surrounding him might not have even been true. The second theme, people are scared of what they do not understand. In Hooper and Elizabeth's conflict, Hooper only asked Elizabeth to listen. He never asked her to understand him. Hooper knows that understanding is not possible because of the deep separation between two people. But Elizabeth feared what she could not understand and left Hooper, saying, "Your words are a mystery too." The townspeople also did the same as Elizabeth. They could not understand Hooper's actions and became scared of him and avoided him. The connection between these two, because of people's fear of what they cannot understand, they become distracted from themselves and others. The townspeople noticed that Hooper was out of place, and this alarmed them. They did not realize how they, blatantly ignored Hooper and judged him. Alright. Do you like my little church? It's kind of like a symbolism, I guess, of the church that Hooper preaches in. It's very fun to build it. And of course, it would not be complete without a garden. And so final thoughts that I have, about the story and everything. Overall, the story was really cool to read because it can relate to today and how we can get so caught up in each other, what we forget to take care of ourselves. We can forget how to be a good person because we are so focused on somebody else. And I think, especially in the social media, I say that with quotes, age, we are so focused, on hating certain people or admiring certain people that we just forget to, focus on what we ourselves are even doing. And I think that's so important to focus on yourself during, in whatever you're doing, and not to, stray away from that. You should always try to be yourself and not judge other people for what they're trying to do. Even if it's just as minuscule as wearing a bell, who even cares, But that's just, my thoughts on it. Hope you enjoyed it. I was also kind of hoping for some monsters to come around at this time, but they're not spawning, but that's alright. So, thanks for watching and listening, etc. That was the Minister's Black Veil. So, yeah, thanks.